there are some really crazy things happening in the world of CNN. And I saw this morning, and I thought to myself, my goodness. So you may be familiar with Don Lemon. Don Lemon, of course, had a primetime show on CNN. He used to be, I would say, somewhat sane. Obviously a diva in even in the television realm. Don Lemon is a diva. But he used to be, somewhat sane, I would say. And then Donald Trump happened. And Don Lemon lost his mind, and he became convinced that Donald Trump was Hitler. And then Trump left office, and people realized that CNN had so lost its mind over Trump that there was no real reason to watch them once Trump wasn't in office anymore. In fact, CNN just recently hit a 9-year low in ratings. And this is, I believe, a really good book or long-form streaming show that could be used to tell the story of how CNN lost its way and destroyed its brand in pursuit of the idea that Donald Trump was Hitler, which was never actually true. Trump was a sugar high for CNN that ultimately led to the overall destruction of the brand of CNN. I really do believe that, because now the entire network is floundering. You might not respect MSNBC's political opinions, but before Trump, MSNBC decided we are a left-wing news network. We are going to directly take aim at Fox News. And let me just say this about Fox News. One of the great quotes of all time came from Roger Ailes, who said, yeah, we just discovered there's this great untapped marketplace out there. It's called Half of America. Way more Democrats watch Hannity oftentimes and Tucker and the primetime shows, Laura Ingraham in the evenings, than Jesse Waters. Jesse Kelly's in his own little feud. We may have some fun with that before the week is out. But those CNN shows are actually beaten by many Fox News shows. But MSNBC, you could sit back and you could say, okay, the Rachel Maddows of the world have decided that America's an awful racist place. And there's about 20% of America that believes that. Overwhelmingly, they vote Democrat. They're probably not going to watch Fox News. So we're going to serve that marketplace. And then CNN was kind of your grandpa's news network. And what I mean by that is, if suddenly there was a major war that broke out, a lot of people in default still had the brand awareness of CNN from the time that they peaked. I think this is beyond a shadow of a doubt. In the early 1990s, everybody loved CNN. I'm talking about like the first Gulf War. I don't remember there being, and maybe some of you are OGs out there, but I don't remember there being a strong argument that during the first Gulf War, CNN was in some way in the tank for one political party or the other. I believe CNN as a news brand hit its absolute apex in the first Gulf War. Everybody was watching CNN. Ratings went through the roof. You trusted them to bring you the news of the first Gulf War. I was a kid then, but I remember rushing home from school, and I remember putting on CNN and wanting to know what the latest was in Iraq and in Kuwait. And I bet almost every single one of you, regardless of your age, and you may be thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, I'm listening to Clay Travis, and he was a kid in the first Gulf War. Yes. I was coming home from 5th and 6th grade during the first Gulf War, putting that thing on and watching it. Buck wasn't even born. I'm joking. Buck, by the way, on his honeymoon, for those of you who don't know, he will be back next week. He and Carrie are having a lovely time, I believe, in the South Pacific. I'm trying not to. I felt bad because I put him on an email yesterday, and I was like, I shouldn't have done that, but I don't not want to have him on the email. I've tried to avoid texting him because he said, hey, I'm just going to be on the beach. I'm trying to avoid bringing him into any of the daily drama that's involved in America right now, because he's out in the South Pacific celebrating with his new wife, Carrie. She's fantastic. So everybody agrees that CNN, I think by and large, peaked in those years. And then they kind of fell apart as Fox News rose, and they didn't really have a good spot. People would still go to them when it was election night or real news broke out. But by and large, they continued to just kind of flounder. And then they decided under Zucker that who was the leader there, that Trump was evil and that they had to make that their brand. And so they left news and became MSNBC. And so they went to war with Donald Trump. And it gave them a sugar high. The Don Lemons of the world, the Anderson Coopers of the world, the Jake Tappers of the world, they suddenly had a larger viewership. But it was a sugar high. And as soon as Trump left, they've collapsed and they're actually floundering. And their morning show, Poppy Harlow, Caitlin Collins, and Don Lemon, is an abject failure. So they took Don Lemon, whose primetime show was a disaster, out of the primetime lineup, and they put him on this morning show, and they put him between two women. And you can just tell at this point that all three of these people hate each other. And by the way, that's not necessarily bad television. It's not sustainable television, but in the short term, it's not bad television. So this morning, they were discussing Nikki Haley, who officially yesterday, as you all know, announced that she was entering into the Republican presidential primary and that she's taking on Donald Trump. Nikki Haley is 51 years old. As a politician, that's relatively young. Certainly it's relatively young compared to 80-year-old Joe Biden or even 76, I believe, year-old Donald Trump. That is clearly a generational divide there. Nikki Haley, 51, and part of her case that she's making, part of the argument for why she should be president is she represents a new generation, and she believes she's in her prime. Well, for some reason, Nikki Haley saying she was in her prime really got under Don Lemon's skin. Now, Don Lemon is 56. So, I mean, he's not particularly young. It's not like he's 36. But Nikki Haley, 5 years younger than Don Lemon, says she's in her prime, and Don Lemon had an issue with that. In fact, he went to Google to find out when women are in their prime, and this happened this morning on CNN. Listen.
She says people, politicians or something are not in their prime. Nikki Haley isn't in her prime. Sorry. When a woman is considered to be in her prime in her 20s and 30s and maybe 40s.
What are you talking? Wait.
That's not according to me.
Prime for what?
It depends. I mean, it's just like prime. If you look it up, if you Google when is a woman in her prime, it'll say 20s, 30s, and 40s. I don't necessarily.
40s. Oh, I got another.
I'm not saying
decade.
I agree with that. So I think she has to be careful about saying that politicians aren't in their prime.
We need to qualify. Are you talking about prime for like childbearing, or are you talking about prime for being president?
What the facts are. Google it. Everybody at home. When is a woman in her prime? It says 20s, 30s, and 40s. And I'm just saying Nikki Haley should be careful about saying that politicians are not in their prime and they need to be in their prime when they serve, because she wouldn't be in her prime according to
Google
or whatever it is.
Amazing. I mean, I don't know how many of you had heard that clip, but Don Lemon, as his journalisming, decided that he needed to know when women were in their prime. And so he sat down in front of his computer and he Googled, when is a woman in her prime? And I'm sorry, this is almost impossible for me not to laugh while thinking about. So you got a gay man, Don Lemon. He hears that Nikki Haley says, I'm in my prime, I'm ready to roll. She's 51 years old. And Don Lemon is like, she is not in her prime. I need to go to Google and do a legitimate investigation for journalism here of when a woman is in her prime. And then he comes on CNN and says that Nikki Haley is not in her prime because women, according to his Google search, are in their prime in their 20s, 30s, and maybe 40s. That was his quote. Now, this is amazing because I don't know how dumb Don Lemon is, but the answer is quite dumb, I think. I just don't know to the quite extent of how dumb he is. There's a difference between, and I can't believe that this didn't go off in his head and he didn't think. A lot of people discuss when you're in your prime childbearing age, right? And that is different than when you're in your prime as a politician. Most women are in their prime childbearing ages in their 20s, 30s, and maybe their 40s. It's extended now because I think women are in far better shape today than they were, let's say, 30 or 40 years ago. The idea that you would go on CNN, this is a gift to Nikki Haley's campaign. The idea that you would go on CNN and argue that Nikki Haley, who is 51 years old, is out of her prime as a politician. You can't even get elected president until you're 35. So in Don Lemon's mind, are women only eligible to be elected president when they're in their 30s and their 40s? I don't remember him ever saying anything like this about Hillary Clinton. If he had said anything like this about Hillary Clinton, he would have been fired immediately. Now, I'm not pro-cancel culture, as you all know. But Don Lemon moving to mornings on CNN and becoming the biggest misogynist in all of media is a direction I did not foresee occurring. And I got to be honest with you, I just cannot believe how crazy this really is. So you guys know that I kind of like doing PR. I'm fearless about it, and I'm just totally all in on promoting what we do and everything else. But I also love thinking about the PR people at CNN having to react to suddenly the deluge of people asking them about Don Lemon saying women are only in their prime in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And it is so inconceivably dumb to me that Don Lemon's research for his national television show, you may not like Buck or me. I think, and certainly our mothers would agree, that you have awful taste if that is your opinion. But we spend hours and hours and hours every day reading voluminous amounts of information to make sure that when we talk to you, we have a strong foundation for the beliefs that we're sharing with you. And as I always say, we work as hard as we possibly can to get our facts as accurate as possible. Don Lemon sat down in front of a computer and Googled, when is a woman in her prime? And then went on CNN as his lead argument and said Nikki Haley needs to be careful arguing that she's in her prime because she's 51. And then when his co-host recoiled and said, 51's not that old to be running for president. Remember, after all, you can't even run for president until you're 35. And Joe Biden's 80. I think most of you out there would be like, yeah, there's a pretty substantial difference between 51 and 80. Like, that is a big generational divide. Joe Biden could very easily be Nikki Haley's father. And yet, that is Don Lemon's argument. And when his co-host fired back, he said, Google it. I didn't put that in my repertoire. The next time my wife disagrees with me on anything, I'm just going to be like, why don't you just Google it? Even if it's something that is totally my opinion and you can't prove it by Googling it. Like, you can Google what the capital of Kansas is. I believe it's Topeka. Boom. 5th grade for the win there. If I got that wrong, we're going to pretend this clip never happened. You can Google a fact. When is a woman in her prime is not a fact-based Googleable subject. That is amazing to me. That's like me deciding, hey, what's the best radio show, typing it in, and certainly it ain't coming up as Clay and Buck because we know Google's biased against us with the algorithm. But if it did, me just being like, boom, Google it. What an imbecile. I can't tell you how much I love that CNN is just completely imploding right now every single day as we watch. And those guys hating each other on that CNN morning show is pretty glorious. To me, this is a total and complete gift to Nikki Haley. If you were in Nikki Haley's campaign team right now and you were mad-libbing the most ridiculous things that could be said about you and who could say them, CNN host Don Lemon saying she's basically out of her prime and too old to be running for president is probably at the very apex of what you could construct as a perfect story for you and your candidate. I haven't heard Don Lemon mention a word about Kamala Harris being out of her prime, way older, or Hillary Clinton being out of her prime, way older, or even contemplating the very idea that that would be a subject matter worth discussing. Tony, I love this. Tony in Orlando, you got a theory about women in their prime.
Okay, so in regards to what Don has to say, let's just think for a minute the people in the villages. The villages have got the highest STD rate in the nation. Those folks there, they're all retired. They play golf. They do archery. They have extracurricular activities. They drink, and they, So don't tell me that women are in their prime only for their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. You want to explain the villages to me?
Thanks for the call. I cannot confirm or deny. I have not had the Google machine in front of me to know if the Villages has the highest STD rate in the nation. That seems high to me. I'll put the team on that claim. The Villages, for those of you who don't know, is a monster retirement community in Florida where I guarantee you we have a monster number of listeners right now. Hopefully all of them don't have STDs. But that is very funny. I'll tell you, I was out with I won't name him, a behind-the-scenes member of the Outkick crew. We have a lot of different shows that we put on, Outkick.com, the site that I run, that I sold to Fox. And the guy's in his 40s, and we had a couple of single guys sitting at the table. One of them was like 25, and the other guy was 45 or so. And they were talking about the age range of the girls they like to date, and the 25-year-olds like, I'll date up to 32, 33. And, he's 7 years older than him, and, basically college grads to 32, 33. The 45-year-old said, I only date women in their 60s. My jaw dropped. I legitimately did not know what to say. He's like, I can't handle the drama of young women. Women in their 60s know what they want. My jaw hit the floor. I've never, and so maybe he knows what he's talking about. He certainly would disagree with Don Lemon about women out of their 40s being out of their prime. Couldn't believe when he said it. I love women around 60 years old. That was the direct quote. Good for him. 45-year-old guy. Chasing cougars. Mark in Rochester, what you got for me?
Can you imagine if you or Buck or any conservative commentator would have said that our Vice President Kamala Harris, who's 58, is past her prime? The liberal mob would have circled you guys and would have called you not only a misogynist, but a racist as well.
You're right. You're 100% right about that. I mean, if Tucker Carlson had said Nikki Haley is too old to be president, people would have lost their minds. Heck, if Buck or I said it, people would lose their minds. I'm banned from CNN for saying that I believe in only two things completely, the First Amendment and boobs. If you haven't seen that clip, you will laugh. You will be entertained by it. I am legitimately banned by CNN. They will not allow me to go on the network because I said I only believe in two things completely, the First Amendment and boobs. Now, look, that's a funny line that I've been saying on my show for a long time, because if you say you're a First Amendment absolutist, which frankly I am, a lot of people out there just they don't really understand what that means. And so I just kind of expanded it on my radio show years ago. I said, look, there's only two things in this country that have never let me down: the First Amendment and boobs. And I said it on CNN, defending as an anti-cancel culture argument to make. And CNN lost its mind. I am legitimately banned from being able to appear on the network because of that hit that I did on their network on a Friday afternoon back in 2017. Everybody wanted me fired for saying that. To her credit, our boss here at Premier, Julie Talbot, stood behind me 100%. But is that a surprise? And what was really funny was, like a week later, it's not funny that this happened, but the way they covered it was funny. Hugh Hefner died sometime in 2017, like a month after, not very long after CNN banned me. And CNN did days of coverage about what a hero Hugh Hefner was. Hugh Hefner is the original First Amendment and boobs guy. It made him $100 millionaire. It bought him the Playboy mansion. Nobody has ever supported the First Amendment and boobs more than Hugh Hefner, and CNN called him a hero. They banned me, maybe for life. I don't think they're going to have me on anytime soon. Meanwhile, Don Lemon's running around out here saying women are out of their prime after they left their 40s because he Googled it. John in White Bluff, Tennessee, you got a theory of when CNN lost its mind.
Yes, sir. It began in 1998 when CNN published a completely erroneous story about a top-secret mission in 1970 conducted during the 8-year secret war in the Vietnam War. It was one of the most historic missions. CNN with Peter Arnett came back and reported it as a mission to get deserters, and of course they always threw in they killed women and children. It was wrong. It was erroneous. They had to do a retraction. Some of the people on the staff were fired, and a lot of military viewers stopped ever turning to CNN at that point in time, sir.
I appreciate that update. I don't know, and you can certainly make arguments for when exactly CNN lost its way as a primarily news-gathering, very trusted network. For me, I think CNN was incredibly trustworthy, in my mind. Some of you will disagree. Through the Gulf War. Again, I was watching it as a 5th and 6th grader, so I'm not claiming that I was some, media savant. So there may have been bias certainly apparent then that, when you're 11 or 12 years old, you're not necessarily noticing. But Trump destroyed them. Trump destroyed the CNN brand. And I'll give you an example of when I can't trust that you're going to be honest to me anymore, then your brand is dead to me. I'll give you an example last night. I was watching the Tennessee-Alabama basketball game. You guys know I'm a big sports fan. So I'm watching on ESPN2, and Jay Billis, who is a very knowledgeable college basketball prognosticator, was the analyst on the broadcast. And I couldn't trust Jay Billis anymore to analyze college basketball because in the back of my mind, every time he would give a strong opinion one way or the other, right call, wrong call, I would think this is the guy who defended and said, I stand behind that Duke volleyball player who lied about the BYU racial slur. Jay Billis said she was brave for speaking out. She was courageous. And even though she is a liar and she was mistaken, he didn't change his opinion. Once I know, and I would say this should be true for all of you out there, once you become aware that someone will lie to you because the facts are inconvenient, you shouldn't trust that person anymore. Now, there's a difference between not trusting an opinion, right? There are lots of things out there I can believe, and you can be like, I don't know if I trust Clay on that. I don't know if I believe that he's right on that opinion. But as soon as someone will lie to you about facts, then you shouldn't trust their opinion anymore. I used to always tell my audience in sports, I would say, hey, you can agree or disagree with my opinion about who wins the Super Bowl. A lot of times I'm wrong. Happen to be right about the Chiefs this year. But sometimes you're wrong, right? But if I give you facts that are 100% untrue to support my opinion, you should trust me less even if you agree with my opinion. And the analogy I would give is I would say, look, I don't think Tom Brady's going to win the Super Bowl this year. And you could say, okay, he's retired now, but pretend I was saying that before this year started. You could say, okay, I don't know if I'm going to agree or disagree. But if I followed it up by saying, because Tom Brady's never been good enough to take a team to the Super Bowl, you might agree with my conclusion. Tom Brady's not going to win the Super Bowl, but you should trust me less because my facts are wrong. Tom Brady's been to 10 Super Bowls. One of the big problems that we have in America today is a lot of people don't check to see whether the facts are right. They just jump to the opinion. I want you to trust me on the facts and agree or disagree with my conclusion, because that's an opinion. A lot of people don't understand the difference between facts and opinions. As soon as I know that Jay Billis has lied to me because he's saying that girl had a racial slur, yelled at her, and she's brave and courageous to have spoken out about it, that didn't happen. Her story is not true. As soon as Jay Billis, who works at ESPN, tells me that, I don't trust his opinion on a block or a charge anymore, because I can't get past the fact that he lied to me. And I think all of you out there would be smart to put that same test to every media figure. I don't get worked up about people's opinions. We all have different opinions. As my mom taught me at a young age, opinions are like butts. We all got them. I think that's still permissible to say. Democrats haven't decided that some people don't have butts yet. That may be next in the future. Who knows? I think we can still say that. So you're entitled to your opinion. I'm entitled to mine. We should all have debates. But you aren't entitled to your own facts. And there is a lot of factual misinformation out there. And I'm constantly aware of it in a way in the past that I wasn't. And that's because I've just seen so many blatant lies out there that are accepted as fact. And I'd encourage you to keep that in your mind out there. Whatever media you're consuming, as soon as you know someone has lied to you, and I don't mean someone's opinion was wrong. There's a difference. I thought it was going to be a red tsunami. I was wrong in 2022. My opinion was wrong. That happens. But as soon as someone is lying to you about facts and you know it, even if you agree with their opinion, you should trust them less. Just keep that in your mind. I think it's important. Brooks in Springfield, Missouri. What'd you think of Don Lemon?
Not much, but let's move on. Two things I want to point out. Number one, a few hundred years ago, lifespans being much shorter than they are today, a woman's prime was in between 15 and 30.
Yeah,
and,
good point.
Also, pardon me?
I said good point.
Oh, thank you. And the other thing is, did Don Lemon ever Google, when is a man's prime?
That's a great point. That is a great, thank you for the call. Yeah, it's true. Like in the Middle Ages, if you were 15, you were like middle-aged. You only lived to be like 36. So you better start having kids when you were like 12, 13, as soon as you possibly could, because you weren't going to live very long. That's really great. Jim in Newport News, Virginia.
Yeah.
Fire away, Jim.
Oh, yeah. I was just wondering if The View is going to have anything to say about this idiot Don Lemon.
Oh, thank you for the call. That is a fantastic question. Joy Behar and Don Lemon in a debate would be the exact opposite of the Lincoln Douglas debates. It'd be like John Fetterman against Joe Biden. What are the two dumbest people we could have right now have a debate? Can you imagine if John Fetterman and Joe Biden tried to debate each other right now, even though they're on the same side? First of all, I don't know that they understand they're on the same side, because I'm not sure either one of them knows what world they're in. Joy Behar and Don Lemon debating men versus women and when they're in their prime. I'm not going to lie, I'd probably watch. I definitely would watch. George in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. How are things at Southern Miss? Appreciate you calling.
Everything's good. Pew Research Center in 2019 did a poll. The Democrats generally viewed the 50s as the best age for a president. Now, had Don Lemon done his research and he was interviewing her to be a president candidate, he should have known that's what she was referring to.
Thank you. Thank you for that's a great call. Look, I would be fine. Everybody, first of all, when you think about prime, like your athletic prime for men tends to be around 27 or 28 years old, right? When you, as a man, reach your apex of athletic ability. I actually remember having this conversation with Buck because your intellectual prime is later, right? I think I'm pretty good at radio right now. I'm 43. How much longer could I go and continue to get better at radio? I think you can be really good in your 50s and your 60s. And I think most of you out there, to your point on Nikki Haley, I think most of you out there, if you had to choose, would say, what age would you want the president to be? I think most of you would say between the age of 45 and 60. I'm just saying if you had to pick an age, when is the prime age for president? I think most of you would say 45 to 60. Doesn't mean you can't be a great president at 65 or 75 or 35. Just in most people's minds, I think that's the answer. Not understanding just basic level here. So Nikki Haley took a dig at both Joe Biden and Donald Trump in her announcement, saying it was time for a new generation of leadership. We didn't need leaders over the age of 75, which is both a shot at Joe Biden and Donald Trump, right? So then they're reacting to it on the CNN morning show, and Don Lemon says that he has a problem with it because Nikki Haley, who is 51, in his mind is past her prime because she's not in her 20s, 30s, or 40s. And so, I think probably what happened is Don Lemon says he Googled when is a woman in her prime, which is such a ridiculous form of research to do. That was his defense for why he had that perspective. So prime is different for different things, right? I'm not in my athletic prime right now. I'm 43. My athletic prime was not great, but it would have been around the age of 27 or 28. If you are 51 years old right now and you are a woman and you are listening to us, you are Nikki Haley's exact same age, you are not in your prime for having children. That's not controversial, right? Most women would have their children in their 20s, 30s, or 40s. It doesn't mean that women can't have children older. Those are the prime childbearing ages, right? That's not controversial. But the idea that a woman would not be in her prime to be president at 51, I think most people out there would say, hey, if I had to pick a decade that the president would, his age or her age, most people would say the 50s, right? Most people would say you're old enough to be smart. You've probably raised kids, but you're not old enough that you're outside of your physical prime. Joe Biden is clearly outside of his prime. Whatever you think about him politically, he probably hit his prime as a politician in his 40s, 50s, or 60s. Certainly, he's way past his prime now. So I just don't think Don Lemon's very smart. And I think when he's not the solo host, his lack of intelligence is getting exposed even more. But Don Lemon put up a tweet, and he said, the reference I made to a woman's prime this morning was inartful and irrelevant, as colleagues and loved ones have pointed out, and I regret it. A woman's age doesn't define her either personally or professionally. I have countless women in my life who prove that every day. I don't see any way, so that's Don Lemon, that's the tweet that he put out. I don't see any way that Don Lemon keeps his job on this morning show for very much longer, because we know for certain that Don Lemon, who is 56, is not in his prime, because he lost his primetime television show. In fact, they fired him from that. They now put him on as a part of an ensemble cast on the CNN morning show, and he's the worst member of that morning show, alongside of Poppy Harlow and Caitlin Collins. Credit to Poppy Harlow, who called him out for this comment, but Don Lemon's career is undoubtedly past its prime.